Hello, grade 12s. Welcome back from the short break. It's Economics with me, Spiwe, and we are looking at perfect competition or the perfect market. So we are now going to move on to the industries and individual businesses. Remember, we said that under these conditions, because there is a large number of buyers and sellers, it is not possible for one participant to actually influence the price because based on the fact that there is a huge number of buyers and sellers that are involved in this market. So now we're looking at industries and individual businesses. So all businesses produce an identical product or a homogeneous product. So this means that the products produced are all perfect substitutes for each other. Okay, so people can't say, well, I have to go and look for a product that is slightly cheaper or that has, a little bit of quality downgraded so that it could drop the price. So it is not possible. So all the products that are produced by businesses in this particular environment are considered to be the same or identical, and therefore they act as perfect substitutions for each other because they are charged at the same price. The quality, the design, and the style is the same. Under perfect competition, the individual producer cannot charge a higher price, which is P2, and will not sell its product at a lower price, which is P0. So prices have to be the same. So you can't have a slightly different price because you want to influence the customer base. You have to sell the product at the price that is determined by the market. If you try and increase the price, then your customers are going to leave your business and then they will go and purchase from another business. And you are not allowed to drop your price to P0 in order to try and influence people to come and buy from you. Then moving on to our next point, if the producer tries to sell the product at the higher price, it will lose all its customers since they can buy the exact same product from someone else at a price of P1. Okay, so if they try and move the price to P2, then the customers will then move on to another business because they know that they can purchase the same product that is being sold at P2 and they can purchase it from the price which is set at P1. So it's important to note that because if you increase your price, then your customers are going to leave because they know that there is a business or there's another supplier who is selling the same product because here you're dealing with identical products and they can get it at a price that is considered to be the market price. So the producer will also not sell it at P0 since it can in any case sell all its output at the price or at the market price of P1 and it wishes to maximize the profit. So the producer knows that they can't sell the product at P0 because they know that they have a good chance of selling all their quantities at P1. So they don't need to go to P0 because then you are lowering the price. Almost here you are guaranteed that you can actually maximize on your profits because you know that you can sell all your output at P1. So there's no need to go to P0 because at P0 you are not going to maximize your profits. So it's important that you stick to P1 because at P1 you are almost guaranteed that you will sell all your outputs and then in that regard you will then maximize all your profits. The individual producer needs to decide the quantity supplied, Q1 or Q2. This will have no effect on the market price. Okay, so it doesn't matter how much you supply. Remember we said there are no limits in terms of quantity, so you will then produce based on your production capacity. But the fact that you can produce at Q1 or Q2 will not have any implication or will not actually affect the market price, because the market price is going to stay the same whether you produce at Q1 or at Q2. So just be aware of those important points, and that if you sell at P0, you are not going to maximize your profits. So it's better to sell at the market price of P1 and then sell all your outputs and maximize on your profits. So just be aware of those interesting points. Then a change in the market price. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to move my slide back. There we are. So a change in the market price can take place if the market supply increases. This could, for instance, be the result of good rains in the maize industry, which implies that most producers will increase the quantity maize supplied to the market. So this is the only time where we can actually have a change in the market price. This is when the supply increases, and then it could be that that we had good rains in that particular season, and that was good for the maize industry, and this implies that producers will increase their quantity because of the good season that they've had in terms of rain over there. Okay, so that is the one instance or an example of a situation where we can actually have a change in the market price. So from demand and supply analysis, we know that an increase in supply will cause a rightward shift of the supply of the market supply curve, and the equilibrium price will fall. Okay, so now this is the one of the laws of demand and supply analysis. The fact that when there's an increase in supply, this will cause a rightward shift of the market supply curve, and the equilibrium price will fall. Okay, and based on the fact that there has been an increase in supply, and hence we are now in a situation where we can say the market price has been changed because of the increase in supply, because there was a good good rain in that particular season, so the maize industry did exceptionally well. Okay, so now we've been talking about the industry and we've been talking about the individual firms. So there are quite a few things that we need to just work out from this. So here we've got figure 6.2a, which shows the industry, and then we will look at another diagram or graph later on that will just show the individual firms. So there are a few things that are happening right here. So I'm just going to go back to my points and then be back to the slide. So now we are looking at determining the market price. So how do we actually determine the market price? So there are a few things that we can do. So to determine the market price for a firm under perfect competition, you need to draw two graphs next to each other, and then on the left is the graph for the industry, and then on the right is the graph for the firm or the individual producer. So you need two graphs. So one on your left, and then also one on your right. So on your left, you're going to have the industry, and then on your right, you're going to have the firm or the individual producer. So it's important that you have the two graphs if you want to determine the market price for perfect competition. Okay, so I showed you figure 6.2a from the previous slide, which represents the industry. So I'm going to pull my slide up. There we are. So it represents the industry, and it shows the interaction of supply, of demand and supply, which we refer to them as market forces, because we know that price here is not determined by individual firms, but it is determined by market forces, which is demand and supply. So the market forces are in equilibrium at the point of intersection of demand and supply curves, which is represented by E. So let's go back here. All right, so this will be the equilibrium point where the demand curve and the supply curve intersect. Okay, and then we call this E, which is our equilibrium. So that is the first point that we need to note. Remember, we're looking at industry. So this will be our first curve. I didn't want to fit the two graphs on one slide, but I wanted us to focus on the industry first and then later on move on to the individual firms. Okay, so that has been established, so we know where our equilibrium point is. And then at equilibrium, the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. This determines the market price, okay? So now we're looking at the quantity demanded equals to the quantity supplied, and hence we have our equilibrium. And then this will determine our market price, okay? So this is how we determine our market price at the point where the quantity demanded equals to the point where the quantity is supplied. So our market price will be here. Okay, so that would be P1. P1 will be our market price. Remember, there is no point in selling at P2 because if you sell at P2, you are going to lose your customers here because you are selling above the market price. So because you are dealing with homogeneous products or identical products, people will stop buying from you because you are charging a higher or a slightly higher price than that of other businesses or other firms. So they would rather go somewhere else to get the product at P1. And if you sell at P1, that is the market price. So you're almost guaranteed that you will sell all your output and maximize on your products, on your profits. So what's the point of going to P2 when you know that for P2 you could lose customers? So rather stay at this intersection between supply and demand where your quantity demanded equals to your quantity supplied. So this will be considered to be our market price. Okay, so now let's move on to the individual producer now that we've looked at the industry itself. So what happens when we are dealing with an individual producer of a particular product? So now we look at figure 6.2b, and that's for a firm or for an individual producer. So one producer will not be able to influence the market price and has to accept the market price, which is P1. He is a price taker because he is not in a position to actually influence the market price. So he has to take the price that has been set by the market forces of demand and supply. Because this is the only price the producer can charge, the demand curve for the producer is a straight line drawn at P1, okay? So because then there aren't any prices. We can't say there's going to be a shift, there's going to be a movement because the price is set and the individual or the producer is a price taker in this regard. So they have to take what the market price is and they can't actually change that. So the horizontal line at the market price, which is P1, is the demand curve, which is DD. Then the average revenue, which is AR, is the marginal revenue curve. Okay, so let's go back to our graph and see all of this. Okay, so here's the straight line because this is the price. So here's the market price over there. And then this is what we mean that it's just going to be a straight line. And then because they can't actually do anything about the price in this regard, they have to take the price that is determined by the market forces and just accept it. And hence we call them the price takers. So we're just going to have a straight line, which is the demand curve at P1. And then this will then illustrate what the market price is in this regard. Okay, so that's quite interesting. And now that we've looked at ways to determine the market price. All right, so now let's just sum up the lesson because this has been quite an interesting lesson where we've learned a bit more about what perfect competition is all about and also the perfect market. So a number of things that we've learned in this lesson. So we've learned about perfect competition, the fact that it occurs in a market structure with a large number of participants who have access to all the required information about the marketplace and are all price takers. Okay, so you have a large number of participants who have access to all the information, and they are all price takers in this particular instance. Prices are determined by demand and supply, and we call these market forces because they help to determine the price. So prices are not dependent or determined by individual firms, but they are determined by the forces of supply and demand. Examples of market structures demonstrating most conditions of a perfect competition include the stock market, the foreign exchange market, the central grain exchange, and the agricultural produce markets. So these are examples of market structures that best demonstrate the most conditions of a perfect competition. Well, that's a wrap of today's lesson. I trust that you've learned so much and you've enjoyed today's lesson. From me, Uspiwe, it's a very goodbye and cheers.